From News 13, the latest breaking news, county by county coverage, plus weather on the ones. This is your midday news weather now.
President Donald Trump recently announced he's reversing some of former President Barack Obama's policies when it comes to Cuba. To break down what that really means, how it's changed, how it can impact you in your daily life, Barry University College of Law Professor Michael Morley is here. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So first of all, what were the most significant changes announced by President Trump? What did you see?
There's really three major changes that were included in the president's announcement. First, the president has directed the Secretary of State and the Secretary of the Treasury to make it illegal to engage in financial transactions with the Cuban military or intelligence services or entities affiliated with them, which actually will have a huge impact because, as you know, Cuba is a totalitarian military dictatorship. So most of the tourist facilities that people would be doing business with, including many hotels, restaurants, tourist destinations, are connected with the Cuban military, and that money actually flows to the Cuban military, so many of those types of transactions would be prohibited. Secondly, certain categories of travel to Cuba have been tightened in order to more fully comply with federal law, in particular the Libertad Act. Educational travel to Cuba will now be required to be conducted in affiliation with U.S. educational groups, and so-called people-to-people travel to Cuba, if you want to engage in that, you actually have to spend time with the Cuban people and can't simply take a salsa dancing lesson and call it a day.
Which is sort of what it was before, right?
Under the Obama administration,
okay.
Correct. And then finally, the directive emphasizes that the administration will be auditing people who go to Cuba to review their financial transactions, the time they spent there, to make sure that their travel complied with the requirements.
So you've sort of answered my next question. U.S. citizens will still be able to travel to Cuba, just a little bit different circumstances, right?
Oh, absolutely. Federal law authorizes 12 different categories of travel to Cuba. These changes and regulations affect only 2 or 3.
What kind of criminal penalties might someone face who actually is found in violation of these rules?
There's a theoretical possibility of criminal penalties, but for the most part, these types of restrictions tend to be enforced through civil fines and other types of administrative measures.
And what about businesses, airlines, any cruise operators, travel operators? How will what's changed recently change it for them as well?
Well, we don't know all the details because as of this point, the president has signed a memorandum ordering agencies to create regulations. There is a carve-out that allows for business transactions involving the Cuban military for ports and airports, cargo ships, things like that. How broad or narrow that will be defined remains to be seen. The major obstacle these companies face is that it is illegal under federal law, independent of these regulations, to traffic in confiscated property, which means all of the property that the Cuban government seized during the Cuban Revolution that it nationalized, under U.S. law, that's considered confiscated property. So when airlines are landing in airports in Cuba or ships are docking there, they're actually incurring serious risk of liability under federal law.
Just to wrap it up, from a business perspective, do you think it was a good move or a bad move?
It was absolutely the right move, particularly from a human rights perspective, to prevent funneling U.S. dollars in to prop up a regime that engages in gross human rights violations, and from a national security perspective, because the Cuban military engages in activities with other countries. Not only 2 years ago, they were caught smuggling missiles, jet fighters, and anti-aircraft equipment to North Korea, of all places. So preventing U.S. dollars from subsidizing the Cuban military is absolutely right from a moral and a practical perspective.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you.